All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Millennials World podcast. And you know what, Brian? I've been thinking, right? I've been in the market recently for a nasty video on the internet, right? Like the other day, I was just about ready to crank my,
Oh, I know tons of those.
exactly. I was trying to find an interesting video, had nothing to do with that kind of nasty video, right? So I looked up video
Oh,
nasty and nasty video. And one of the results came up for a moral panic in the UK that involved a lot of disgusting, awful horror movies in the 80s and 70s. Have you heard of this?
no. And it seems strange to me because, in the UK, it seems like they do a lot of disgusting things there. It seems like it's almost like second nature to them. But maybe it's about it being in public. I don't know.
No, exactly. And, of course, at one point we talked about the Hays Code and we talked about American censorship. So I thought this week we could talk about British censorship and the video nasty trend. So this week I want to review a very legendary film, which is an easily forgotten random Sasquatch horror movie from the 80s that was banned in the UK for some reason. I mean, we'll talk about it once we get to the plot, but it is very awkward that it was banned because by modern standards, it's
Well,
pretty tame in a lot of ways, but it's also very funny.
well, not only that, but like how many more people know of this movie and ended up seeing this movie because it was included in the video nasty controversy? This movie that may have just like died, may have just been forgotten, is now part of like cinema history because of that. All of these kind of pearl clutching social conservatives have basically rescued this movie from oblivion, as far as I'm concerned.
No, 100%. And we're going to be part of that today by giving it more of a legacy than it probably deserves. But this week, we're going to be reviewing the 1980 Sasquatch horror movie, Night of the Demon. But before we get into our review this week, Brian, let's bring back our segment, Cringe Generational Cringe Millennial Moment of the Week.
Wait, 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 wait.
Woo! Yeah! All right. And you know what? This week, I wanted to do something that was relevant to cringe Bigfoot content because there's a lot of cringe Bigfoot and Sasquatch content. I would say probably 99% of it is cringe, if I'm being honest.
Oh no, yeah, for sure. And it definitely has in recent years kind of, I think on TikTok, it's gotten a little bit of a second wind, kind of a revival. Cryptids in general, but Bigfoot in particular.
No, absolutely. And the thing I want to talk about this week is maybe the single most important piece of Bigfoot pop culture I could possibly imagine that's not that like fucking 60s like lost footage videotape or whatever the fuck.
The classic.
The classic, exactly. So this week I want to talk about an individual who is caught up into this. Now, Brian, are you familiar with Denver Riggleman?
Not by name, yeah. That's like a fake name you would have seen on the FYAD forum back in the day.
Yeah. So Denver Riggleman was a one-term congressman in Virginia.
Oh,
Virginia's
I know who
fifth.
this is.
Oh yes, let's talk.
Okay.
Let's talk about it. Oh, I'm so excited because the audience, I'm sure, does not know. So Denver Riggleman was a one-term congressman who later became an anti-Trump Republican. Who cares about that bullshit? But I found this article, and I remember this happening at the time, but it kind of fell out of my mind until I suggested this movie to review. So I found an article from CBS News, and the header of the article is Bigfoot erotica, in parentheses, becoming issue in pivotal congressional race. And I'm not going to read the whole article.
I forgot about
kind
this.
of long. It's such a funny ass story.
So the thing with, okay, like, go on and I'll add on later, but I remember this now. I do remember this now. I kind of memory hold it.
Yeah. The body is, here's a political attack you don't hear every day or ever. A Virginia congressional candidate says her opponent is unfit for office because he is a devotee of Bigfoot erotica. Democrat Leslie Cockburn said on Twitter that Republican opponent Denver Riggleman fetishizes the mythical ape-like giant, sparking viral online interest in what's surely the most out there line of attack in this election cycle. And her quote is awesome. This is not what we need on Capitol Hill.
It's so undignified.
Cockburn said in a tweet Sunday, her post included pictures from Riggleman's Instagram account showing new drawings of Bigfoot with his, assuming that the made-up creature is male, genitalia covered with a black rectangle.
Oh my. Like, who gives a shit?
Yeah. Well, not only that, but he won pretty handily, which is hilarious too.
It's also,
by the way, in
like,
a blue year, in a blue wave
Yeah.
election year, he won by like almost 10%.
Well, he was just that strong of a candidate. He courted the Bigfoot truther movement, and they weren't necessarily into the sex stuff, but they were like, you know what? He cares about Bigfoot, just like I do.
But Riggleman said allegations that he's into Sasquatch sex life are big, hairy lies from a failing candidate. That's awesome. That's an awesome quote, too, by the way.
Yeah, that rules. It's so great that, like, we're going to spend the rest of our lives toiling away, and these people are just in charge of everything we do.
Yeah. Oh my God. Oh, and the last quote I'm going to include on, or one of the last quotes I have on here. So on Monday, Riggleman said in an interview on Kibbe on Liberty show on the conservative-leaning CRTV. That's not CRT like the CRT they hate, but apparently it was CRTV. Yeah. That among the reasons he wants to be in Congress is to, quote, the freedom to believe in any type of Bigfoot you want, unquote.
Based.
Honestly, kind of a king. I'm going to be real.
Yeah.
Even though he later became an anti-Trump Republican, this is the most based and anti-Trump Republican ever has been. I'm being honest.
Well, like, you almost got to take his side because it's like, yeah, I don't care if he writes Bigfoot porn. Like, I mean, I think it's weird, but I don't give a you know what I mean? Of all the reasons that a Dem could attack a Republican that they're never ever going to do, that they just don't have the sack to do, this is what she goes for, the Bigfoot thing. I don't care.
No, I couldn't give less of a shit, honestly. I don't care one motherfucking bit.
It does speak to how fucked up the news cycle and the national attention span is getting. If this happened in the 90s, it would be like a thing we still talked about as a punchline. It would be like a Bob Dole thing. Like, you know, we would go like, remember that guy that wrote Bigfoot porn? But everything is so heightened now, and the news cycle moves so fast. We forgot about this. I think it was in the news cycle for all of 4 days, and then there was some other bullshit with Trump we all had to make room for, and we all forgot about it.
I mean, there was another one that happened, I want to say around the same time, maybe a couple years before, maybe a couple years later, I don't remember. But there was a guy who I think was running for the congressional seat in Montana and later became governor, where he was being interviewed by some British journalist and he literally pile-drived him. He choke-slammed him and pile-drived him into a desk. And he won 2 days later, and nobody remembers that.
That's what everyone wants to do to British journalists, though.
Yeah.
Of course you
are.
Oh
my God. And by the way, it was to Ben Jacobs. He kind of deserved it, let's be honest. But I did think that was funny. Like, he literally, I think he like choke slammed him or something. He like grabbed him by the throat, like slammed him onto a table because he was being annoying.
Awesome. That's why he won. No question.
Yeah. But, you know, speaking of incredibly violent things relating to Bigfoot, that's our article. There's more of it. It's not that interesting, but I wanted to include the choice bits. But speaking of interesting choice bits, Brian, let's get into these details, because honestly, the details, plot synopsis, and the later Amazon reviews are some of the best I've ever done. I loved every moment of this, because these are all so funny. I'm dead serious. They're all hilarious. Every single one.
I'm looking forward to this. So you've been telling me about this movie for years. I've been aware of it through you and through Cinema Snob. I'm sure at some point years ago, I probably watched the Cinema Snob review of this, and I was like, okay, it's on paper, I knew all the weirdest shit about it. I was like, okay, it's a weird, sleazy Bigfoot horror movie, early slasher. I think I get the picture. And I think I more or less did. But what's interesting about when you actually watch the movie is it kind of delivers, right?
No, it does, but I will say the delivering part, Brian, you will not believe the delivering part at the very end. I promise you, you will go, what the fuck? It is so funny.
Yeah, it's insane.
It is fucking insane. But yeah, so you said early slasher. So once again, this is Night of the Demon. It came out in 1980, but it was released on VHS in 1983. It had a extremely limited theatrical run in 1980. Apparently, it played for a couple theaters in Los Angeles, and that was basically it. And then it got a release on VHS in 1983.
We have to assume, I guess, 83. So that is like peak golden age home video era. So at that point, there's more people are getting home video, but there aren't as many movies. By 83, I think the big studios are still kind of holding out on a lot of their films, right? At that point. But companies making tapes, they need content. People want to watch movies at home now, which is probably why this ended up getting a home video release.
No,
probably
absolutely.
Just companies looking for stuff, and this film they were able to acquire it.
Yes. You know, well, speaking of acquired, so this movie was unrated in the US and it was banned in the UK, I believe in 1984. It was one of 39 banned films, or I should say prosecuted films, under the video nasty moral panic that happened in the early to mid 80s. There are a total of 72 films that were on the video nasty list, but this was only one of 39 either fully banned or pretty much completely banned. And it was banned up until 1994, and it was released only uncut in the UK until 2022. That's when it finally got an uncut release in the UK, which is insane. It's fucking nuts to me.
And this is, when you look at the video nasty list, this is probably one of the gnarlier films on it, because actually you look at a lot of the stuff on it and it's kind of whatever. Pretty gnarly film.
No, there are some scenes, and once we get to the synopsis, oh my God, there are scenes that we'll talk about because it's like, and once again, the reason that they came about is so funny, Brian. I promise you, it is so funny how all these infamous scenes came about. It is hilarious, but I want to save that till the very end. But it is very funny, I promise you. And well, speaking of very funny, this film was directed by a gentleman by the name of James C. Wasson. The screenplay was by Mike Williams, and it was produced, and the story was also written by Jim L. Ball. Now, James C. Wasson, this is the only feature film he ever directed. He's only known for this, quote unquote, known for this movie. And he also directed a bunch of gay porn movies in the 80s, so that's very interesting. And Mike Williams, who I mentioned earlier, this is literally the only thing he was credited for, literally nothing else. And Jim L. Ball is most known for this movie, and also he directed and produced a bunch of gay porn movies in the 80s.
Nice work if you can get it.
Yeah. What's interesting is I thought these guys had like worked together at one point, but they independently made gay porn movies in two separate career paths, which is awesome.
I guess that's where a lot of roads lead, though, you know.
That's fair. But I remember looking up this.
I mean,
like the,
this
yeah, the
podcast
film
doesn't pan
credits.
out. We'll probably end up doing gay porn eventually.
I mean, to be fair, there's a guy who's accused of doing a very serious crime in New York City right now who should have been making gay porn for a while, let's be honest. He's pretty hot. Listen, if there is a GoFundMe for his legal fund, I will 100% put that in every single episode. I promise you that. And then this film is 96 minutes long. It had a budget of about $70,000, and I could not find a box office gross because, once again, this was not really released theatrically. And on Rotten Tomatoes, it does not have an aggregate critic score, although I did see one negative review on there, and these have at least 5 to have an aggregate critic score, and it has a 35% audience score, which I'm not particularly surprised by because this movie has never been critically acclaimed. This is a movie that has at best been ignored and at worst been pretty, I mean, it was literally banned in the UK for almost 40 years, you know what I mean? Or at least partially banned in the UK for
literally
decades.
There was an actual attempt made to like suppress it. So it probably up until recently was a footnote, maybe even a punchline. Pretty accessible now, at least for us. I mean, you and I have probably seen more horror movies like this than a lot of people. It is not bad. I have seen way more incompetently made and way less entertaining horror films.
Yes, especially for, I don't know, big budget, quote unquote, but like a movie that had actual money to it. For a directorial debut, this isn't awful. I've certainly seen much worse.
Right. I mean, it is what it is, right? They were working with the money they had the premise, you know, but it's not like, you ever seen like Tomb of the Living Dead or something? So it's not boring like all that shit is.
Oh, well, get ready, Brian, because once again, that fact at the end of this movie is going to blow your mind. I promise you. It's so funny.
Oh, no.
I watched hours of special features that came with the Blu-ray of this movie. Oh, and by the way, I got to talk about this even before we get to the synopsis here. The company Severin, who I believe are a offshoot of Blue Underground, I could be wrong about that. They're at least affiliated or at least were friends with the Blue Underground people. But they released the 2-disc Blu-ray edition of this movie. And at one point there was like a giant special edition that came with a novelization, a figurine, several patches, like keychains, and a poster. There's so much shit that came with this. It was like $150.
So awesome.
Came out like 2 years ago, by the way. This is an extremely recent physical release, which is awesome. I would have bought it, but the scalpers increased the price by like twice as much. And I'm not willing to pay that much. I'm just going to be honest with you.
Yeah, of course.
But I think it's cool they did that. I think that's awesome they did that for this movie of all things.
Yeah, that owns. I love physical. This is a pro-physical media podcast, and we're probably never going to see anything like the golden era of physical media like we saw in the 2000s again. Many independent companies still cranking out things like that has my blessing.
No, 100%. But yeah, we're talking about this movie here. Let's get into the synopsis. And the synopsis is extremely long, which is hilarious because honestly, not a lot happens in this movie, so I'll try to go through it quickly. But the movie begins with Bill Nugent, played by Michael Cutt, who I do want to talk about him real quick. He's the only person in this movie, the only actor in this movie, who actually had literally any credits after this movie came out. And he was actually a fairly prolific TV extra. Like, he was on TV for like 35, 40 years after this movie came out, which is actually pretty cool. Like, this was the first thing he ever did. But he was like a TV extra after this. And I think he died maybe 2 or 3 years ago. So rest in peace, Michael Cutt, I guess. You were in hilarious Bigfoot movie. And also, by the way, gay porn Burt Reynolds. That's what he looks like in this movie.
Yes.
He looks like a gay porn pervert. But in this movie, he's an anthropology professor. Jesus Christ, that took me forever to say.
This is a very science-oriented film.
By Carla Thomas, played by the actress Shana Thomas, a young woman whose father was murdered in the woods in Northern California. She suspects that his death was caused by a Bigfoot, who, according to legend, resides in the woods in the region. Despite a number of disappearances and brutal murders, including the death of a young couple, that's the one where they're having sex, and like the guy gets dragged on top of the roof of the van. It sounds like he's getting fucked in the ass by Bigfoot, is what you said, and I agree with. And she's like coming the entire time. She's like, oh,
yeah. It's very strange. Yeah, this is your first sign when you're watching this film that something is a little strange about it, some of the choices they made. This guy gets pulled out of the van. Obviously, he's doing it with his girlfriend. And he starts making these noises. Oh, kind of like that.
It's like blood is coming down the fucking windshield because he put him on top of the van.
It's a little strange.
And the other one is, and the butchering of 2 Girl Scouts. And that one's hilarious because this synopsis just tells you all the hilarious death scenes right away, but I'm just going to go with it. Bigfoot literally stabs 2 Girl Scouts to death while they're holding knives, and he makes them stab each other to death with it. It's so funny. Like, why don't you just drop the knife?
Yeah, well, it's also like, I know this actually predates this series. It's kind of like a really dumb version of a Friday the 13th style death. It's like they were trying to do something kind of inventive and weird, but it doesn't really make sense.
No, it doesn't. I mean, this movie was filmed before Friday the 13th came out, so this is a very early slasher movie. I mean, I don't even know if you could call it a slasher movie, but it's been co-opted into it.
Yeah.
And the other one is, and this is probably the most infamous one, the manual emasculation of a biker, otherwise known as pulling off that pecker, decimating that dick, contorting that cock off. And by the way, one of the pins from Severin is literally Bigfoot holding his like uncircumcised dick. It's awesome.
That is awesome.
But yeah, this scene's hilarious. So guys like driving or, riding his bike down the road, he takes a piss and you also see his dick too in it, which is hilarious. But you see Bigfoot grab the dick, like pick him up by the dick. And then the last thing you see is just him like holding his jeans open with blood coming out of where his dick was. And then he bleeds to death.
Pouring out of it. With like a classic B-movie blood pump.
It's great. In the special features, I found out that it was done by taking a condom, cutting the end off of it, and having like a hose of like fake blood coming off of it. So pretty creative.
Yeah,
and also, I found on YouTube, and I don't know how true this is, but I was looking up clips for this movie on YouTube, seeing like comments, and there's a guy in there who claimed that this guy was his stepdad, which I don't know about that. He just claimed that, and he got the name wrong too. So I'm like, I don't know about that, man.
He could only be a stepdad after that scene.
Yeah. And also, I found out later that the reason that they chose this particular actor, because they weren't able to find an actor who was willing to show their dick on film, so they found a porn actor. Yeah. So it's like, it's possible that this guy was your stepdad, but it's like, first off, you got his name wrong. He was like some random porn actor who did literally nothing else on IMDb. And it's possible, but I'm like, that's highly unlikely. I'm just going to be real here. That's pretty unlikely.
That's my claim to fame, is my stepdad got his dick ripped off Night of the Demon. I'm using this for clout on YouTube.
But yeah, so they get their fucking cavalcade of cunts together to go on this trip to find Bigfoot, and the journey begins. They embark by a boat along a river and first camp on the property of an elderly man named Lou Carlson, played by the actor William Nugent. Not related to Ted Nugent, I could be wrong about that, but that's the thing though. No guy in this movie is like shitting their pants and is caked in it to try to get out of going to Vietnam.
To get out of going to Vietnam, yeah.
Who has claimed to witness the Bigfoot. Lou allows them to stay, but is evasive when they attempt to speak to him. When one of the students, Roy, played by Bob Collins, bribes Lou with alcohol, Lou suggests they seek out Wanda, played by Melanie Graham. Now, we'll get back to Melanie Graham in a little bit because one of the Amazon reviews talks about her, and it's very interesting. A recluse who resides deep in the woods and supposedly holds more information about the Bigfoot. Meanwhile, a hunter camping nearby is attacked and impaled by the Bigfoot on a jagged branch. By the way, this is awesome because this was this became a very infamous scene in one of the later Friday the 13th movies, I think part 7, where he grabs that camper by the fucking sleeping bag and like slams him against a tree. And the fact this movie came out this early and has a scene like that is fucking awesome. Like, this is an early nasty movie.
Yeah, that's what it reminded me of too. I was like, the deaths in here, I don't want to say they're all like great, but this is a good point to get back to what I was saying is so a lot of horror films, a lot of low budget independent horror films from the 70s and 80s especially, if you've seen a lot, and you can find them, if you find in the 2000s, there are lots of box sets of public domain horror movies, a lot of them from mid to late 70s, and nothing really happens. A lot of them will have salacious titles, salacious ad campaigns, and when you watch the actual movie, because these were movies that mostly predate like home video. They were meant to be shown at a theater a couple of times and then never seen again. Nothing happens. And that's kind of what I expected this movie to be like, but there's a fair amount of gnarly deaths in here. If you heard about this movie back in the day and somehow you saw it in its small run in the theater, like, oh, it's a movie about a killer Bigfoot, and you went to go see it, I mean, I don't think you would leave feeling ripped off. It delivers on like gnarly, grotesque Bigfoot death.
No, it fucking does. Absolutely. And then the next trivia fact I had here is the Bigfoot costume cost $6,000 to make. So nearly 10% of the budget of this movie just went to the fucking costume, which is so cool.
And you can see every dollar in that costume. It looks so good.
It looks fantastic. It's so good. It looks awful, I'm going to be honest. But I will actually say there's a couple moments in the movie, though, where I do think it looks good. But especially from the back, it looks horrible from the back. It looks so bad.
I think it looks fine in the first half of the film when you only see it for like a second, you know?
Yes.
When they're kind of like hinting at Bigfoot. Once you are just looking at him on screen and you really get a chance to see that costume, you're like, oh, I see.
Yeah. The next day, Nugent and his 5 companions visit the nearby town, where they glean from locals more information about Wanda. She is the daughter of a deranged preacher whose followers were rumored to engage in inbreeding cannibalism and human sacrifice. Emmett has since committed suicide. The father since committed suicide. After learning of this, the group returns to the woods. That night, after the 5 have fallen asleep, they are awoken by the sound of chanting. Bill and Roy follow the sound and stumble upon a satanic sexual ritual involving Wanda around an effigy of Bigfoot. Among the practitioners is a local sheriff. Bill interrupts the ritual by firing a gun, causing the cultists to scatter. It's so strange, to be honest with you, because, like, it doesn't relate to really anything else in the movie, to be honest with you. Like, there's nothing in the movie that indicates that this is, like, a satanic thing. It's, like, a monster movie. It's a cryptid. There's no satanic cult. What the fuck? It makes no sense.
It's also, like, it's kind of like a B-plot, but it doesn't lead to anything. It's not like an inciting force in the story. Like, this cult doesn't lead to anything really happening. The events are already set in motion by Bigfoot.
Yes, 100%. In the morning, Bill and the others find their boat missing and large footprints left on the shore. And also, I totally forgot to mention at the very beginning, there's a scene where Carla's dad, I think, gets his arm ripped off. And, like, there's a pool of blood in a footprint where the title Night of the Demon shows up. Once again, that's a fantastic, like, opening. Awesome. Yeah. Incredible. I love that.
You can tell during the violence in this movie that the filmmakers were like, okay, this is what people want to see. They want the blood and the guts. And they really, like, focus on it. Like, there is, like, an energy to the death and violence scenes here.
No, absolutely.
Which really, for this type of movie, is all you can ask for, right?
No, and the fact that a lot of movies that came out or were made around that time didn't deliver that, it makes it more impressive that they actually did deliver on the carnage here. Like, really.
Exactly.
After making plaster casts of the footprints, they push onward. That night, the Bigfoot attacks a couple of the students while they're having sex, but they survive. And I love that because he just, like, scratches his back and he's like, oh. And then he just, like, runs away. It's so funny. It's like, damn, you fucked up all these people and all you do is scratch this guy's back. He could have just said that was his girlfriend doing that because he was going at it pretty hard.
Yeah. That's what I was thinking, too. I was like, damn, bitch.
Yeah, he could have been like, yeah, my girlfriend at the time. It's like, it looks like a bear claw. It's like, don't ask about it if he had survived.
Don't ask. It's my
spoiler alert, he didn't survive. Spoilers to people that cared. Oh, Jesus. The group eventually reach Wanda's cabin, bribing her with candy, but she is a nervous... I love that, by the way, they literally do bribe her with candy, and it's like the same full-grown woman.
Yeah, does that work?
But she has a nervous breakdown when the Bigfoot is mentioned. That night, one of the students, Pete, is attacked by the Bigfoot, who causes him to shoot himself with his rifle. The others attempt to locate Pete, but find that he has disappeared. And once again, spoiler alert, he dies. If you really cared, he dies.
Yeah.
I know everybody was on the edge of their seat.
Well, yeah, we were identifying with this character.
Yes. Bill decides to hypnotize Wanda the next day, causing her to recall her abusive childhood. And honestly, even though this is not the most infamous like moment of this movie, it's honestly the most horrifying in every single way. It's really upsetting.
Pretty awful. Yeah. So this is one of the things with horror movies from this era is obviously with exploitation films, there's a certain level of like degeneracy you expect. And that's kind of what you're there for, right? And there's things that you'll see in the 70s and 80s you wouldn't see now because maybe we didn't have quite the same understanding of how to talk about them. And like this film is clearly saying, right, that this character was abused and that's bad. Like that's clearly the thing they're saying. But the other thing is like, yeah, but is this really tasteful to have in your Bigfoot, your psychosexual Bigfoot carnage movie, you know?
No, 100%. And just to get it out of the way, so just real quick, I'm going to power through it. So, as a teenager, Wanda was brutally raped by Bigfoot, an event that her father witnessed in horror. Convinced the beast was a demon, Emmett unsuccessfully attempted to induce an abortion by forcing Wanda to drink poison. Wanda eventually gave birth to the mutant, half-demon child, or half-human, half-Sasquatch child, but her father killed it moments after birth. In retaliation, Wanda burned her father alive in his barn, staging it to look like a suicide, which is awesome, by the way, because I know this town's fucked up. There's like a satanic sex thing, allegedly. They believe Bigfoot's like some demon that they worship, whatever the fuck, right? But like in any universe, like, oh yeah, I killed myself by setting myself on fire in a barn and the door was like locked in front of me. That's how everybody dies in a suicide. But hey, it's whatever.
It totally makes sense.
And then also on top of it, after she gets raped by Bigfoot, and they actually show the rape on screen. This isn't implied. She's fighting off Bigfoot and she gets raped by him. I mean, it's a monster, to be clear. It's not like it has necessarily any kind of morality, but it's rough and disgusting to watch.
It goes on a little too long.
It does. And then her father beats her and calls her a whore afterwards, after he locked her out of the house to kind of allow this to happen in the first place, basically. It's horrible. It's so bad. It's so mean-spirited.
Yeah. It's a thing where, like, you know, I don't think the filmmakers are trying to make... I do think they're like, well, what if we have a character who has, like, a religious zealot father who abuses her? And, like, it's just... I don't think that these filmmakers are, like, perverts for making this. I think that there just wasn't the understanding of, like, how you talk about these things in a movie. And it wasn't off the table to say, what if Bigfoot rapes a lady? That's pretty messed up. Like, if you're making a horror movie, I guess, in 1979, and you're like, well, that's really gonna freak people out. And you know, which is obviously a very ignorant way to approach that subject. It makes me feel gross to watch.
No, totally. And to be clear, we're not, like, calling judgment on the filmmakers for doing this. Like, we're not thinking they're endorsing this kind of behavior, obviously.
No.
But it's gross to watch, let's be very clear. And then, and also another kind of infamous moment is when because they actually do show the Sasquatch baby, and it's, like, covered in, like, fucking, like, weird red, like, jelly or whatever. And, like, they actually, because it's clearly, like, a doll or something, but they make, like, some movement to make it, like, audibly cry. It's really gross. It's fucking wild. I was not expecting that on my first watch years ago when I watched this movie. I'm like, oh my god, they actually showed this? I'm like, what the fuck? I thought they were gonna do like a Rosemary's Baby thing or kind of leave it up to your imagination, but they showed the hunk of shit fake doll baby. That's crazy.
Like, they didn't need to. They could have just not shown it, you know?
I mean, I gotta give them credit for having confidence to show the fucking thing. And, like, once again, showing it crying, too, on top of it was like, oh my god, they did that.
I would agree with you if it didn't look like shit.
It does look like shit, I want to be clear. I do, once again, I respect the effort, but it does look awful.
I think we're basically on the same page with this movie. I respect that it delivers. So they did make a more entertaining movie than they had to. Because I guarantee you, they didn't make any more money because of the effort they put in the death scenes or the kills or whatever. So they did that basically for love of the game.
And then the final scenes in the movie here. Hoping to find evidence of Wanda's Bigfoot child, Bill explores a cemetery nearby where he digs up the skeletal remains of the infant Bigfoot. The Bigfoot then appears in the cemetery and absconds with its dead spawn, as Bill and the others barricade themselves in Wanda's cabin. Hours later, the Bigfoot hangs Pete's mutilated body on the porch before breaking into the home. Ignoring a dissonantly calm Wanda, the Bigfoot strangles Carla to death as the others shut themselves in the kitchen. Now, this is where all, like, the fucking end carnage comes in. It's like 5 minutes of just unending carnage. So he chokes Carla to death. Bigfoot breaks into the kitchen where he disembowels another character and grabs his guts and starts whipping the people around it with the guts.
So awesome. This is so awesome. Okay, so up to this point, I'm watching this movie going, this isn't a very good movie, a low-budget horror movie, but, like, I think Taylor and I think you and I have in common is, like, horror is our favorite genre, and we're both inclined to like horror if it's kind of weird and low-budget. So I'm like, okay, I'm enjoying this. I respect it. I see what it did. You know, I'm feeling kind of gross by some of the stuff, but I think that it's, you know, it's not not trying to be like that. And then we get here, this last 5 minutes or so, where Bigfoot just does go apeshit, and I'm like, okay, this owns. This fucking rules. Ripping the guts out of the chest and beating the other victims with the guts. You're like, oh my god, this is so cool.
And then he stabs another girl in the back with like a pitchfork. And then he takes one of the guys and like rams his neck through the window so like it cuts his neck with the broken glass. And then he takes the professor and puts his face on the burner and it comes off and his face is all burnt and black and shit. He's screaming. It's wild.
And none of this is done by like quick cuts and kind of camera pans. You see all of this. The camera's centered on all of this. The pitchfork in the back, the fucking burning face, the guy getting his throat fucking mauled on the window. It's like you are focused on it and you're looking at it for a while. And you're going, oh my god, this is rough.
And you're right, they totally went fucking apeshit. And it's wild to me because, like, obviously there were movies that did stuff like this back then. But let's face it, this was pretty rare for especially a super low budget movie to go this balls to the wall in a death scene like this. It's pretty crazy, to be honest with you. Like,
no, it's not unheard of, but so up to this point, it's been like kind of a sleazy, low budget proto slasher, right? When you get to this point, it becomes like Grand Guignol. It becomes like a Herschel Gordon Lewis film where the gore is so like extreme that it becomes like an artistic statement. I know there's going to be people that think that sounds pretentious, but I am dead serious. There is a point in this movie where it becomes so over the top and so graphic that it becomes impressive as like a piece of art.
Yes, I could not fucking agree more. Like, even though I was enjoying a lot of the scenes before, especially the super violent scenes, this was the one where it clinched me. And I'm like, okay, this movie is an absolute classic. And the fact that it was banned in the UK for decades to me is a crying shame, to be honest with you.
No, because this is like horror history. This is so early in the development of the slasher genre. And also, as you pointed out, there's a bit of a Bigfoot craze going on in the late 70s that this was, I'm sure, riding the coattails of. The fact that horror fans in the UK just couldn't see this movie, it does suck, because this is at least in this regard, a pretty historic film. First on-screen Bigfoot rape.
Yeah, Jesus Christ. So yeah, just finishing up the plot here because there's not much left. So sometime later, Bill lies helplessly in a hospital bed. Now, that's how this movie started as a framing device. As you see this guy in a hospital bed, there's a very hilarious fake-looking bandage over his face, and he's telling investigators and the hospital staff how he ended up that way. And that's how the plot happened after that, which is just hilarious because it's so goofy at the beginning.
It adds nothing. There's no reason for this framing device.
No, not at all. Having been found unconscious in the woods, his face horribly burned. When detectives inquire about Carl and the 4 students, all of whom are missing, Bill recounts his version of events to them. Both the police and attending doctors receive his story with disbelief, and the hospital psychologist deems him criminally insane. And that's how the movie's over. The movie just ends like that, on kind of a wet fart, I'm gonna be honest with you.
Kind of a bummer, man.
Yeah. And then the most amazing trivia fact of all time, Brian, I have to say this one. So, you know how we loved all those infamous, gory, awful scenes in this movie? I should say awful. They're kind of great, but they're awfully gory.
They're awful, they're gory, they're kind of great. I wouldn't say I entirely love them. I have complicated feelings about the deaths in this film.
Well, guess what, Brian? All of those scenes in the film were shot and added to the film by the producer after the movie bombed in the theater.
No! No!
Yes!
No!
Yep.
So everything I said about how movies like this usually are really boring and they don't deliver, I was fucking right. See?
Yep. And by the way, Brian, when you kept talking about that, I was like holding my face because we're not on camera for this. So I was like, oh my God, I'm so ready for him to get this. Yep.
No! That producer is a hero.
Absolute hero. He is the hero of this movie and this story in this episode for sure. So yeah, how it went, because I watched the special features on here and I watched the one with the director and then the producer later. But the director was like, yeah, we showed it around at the theater and everybody laughed and said it was super boring. And then
nothing happened in it. Yes, people don't like that.
Unbeknownst to me, the producer later shot a bunch of gore scenes without any of my input, and then he had me come into the studio and make a bunch of weird sounds, and that was like the one where it sounds like he's getting fucked in the ass. He's like, yeah, make a bunch of weird, like, So that was the director doing that, unknown that these were any scenes added to the movie. He said he didn't even see the movie until he was interviewed.
The director was probably really uncomfortable. This producer's like, hey, can you just, here's a microphone. Can you just go like,
Yeah, say you like it, Daddy. Oh, I'm not going to do that. Okay, you don't have to say that one. And then on top of it, too, what's really funny is that he had no idea this movie was banned in the UK and had like a firestorm of controversy around it. He had no idea of any of this until they interviewed him 42 years later for the Blu-ray release, which is so awesome.
Oh. God, Taylor, I can't get over that. Because, like, do you know sometimes when you kind of like, you find out you're right about something, but you didn't realize how right you were?
Yep. So this movie was pretty much destined to be one of those forgotten public domain shitty horror movies, and then the producer came in to save the day, and he made this
and made it the most
infamous banned
despicable,
movie.
degenerate film of its time.
Yep. I think the rape scene was included, but basically all like the gore scenes, like all the really violent scenes, those were all the producer put them in after the fact.
The thing is with the rape scene is it's actually, I hate to say this because it is gratuitous. It's actually it must have been in there previously because it's not gore. Like it is weirdly graphic. You've got the Bigfoot laying on top of the lady and kind of grinding. I don't even want to say it. It makes me feel bad. But it's actually kind of essential, not essential to the plot, but like, wow. So the only fucking meat on this movie was the rape scene. That's so gross.
Is that wild to think about?
That's of course it bombed. What did they expect?
What's hilarious too is that apparently I also saw that the version without gore and the version with gore were the exact same length. So there were more boring scenes originally.
They had scenes that were just like our protagonist just talking and improvising lines.
Yep. Oh, God, it's so awesome. It's so awesome.
Wow. That last-minute decision literally made this film part of, like, horror history.
It did. And from what I remember, too, he kind of did it, like, guerrilla style because he was, like, he actually had, like, a print of the movie, and the producers, like, never get a print of the movie, and he's like, this movie kind of sucks, it's boring. Let me fix that real quick. So he filmed most of those scenes in, like, his backyard and in, like, a random park that was, like, a few miles away from Disneyland.
And just spliced them into the print himself, or what?
Yep, he did it guerrilla style and did that. Isn't that wild?
Wow. Amazing. The true savior.
True fucking savior. And you know what? Speaking of savior, Brian, we're finally at the Amazon reviews. Now, here's the thing I want to say real quick. I don't think these are the best Amazon review sections. I think those are the S. Craig Zoller ones. But pound for pound, these are the best Amazon reviews for anything we've ever covered. I had 10 potential Amazon reviews here. That's how good these were. Like, and there were only about 200 written reviews. So usually it takes me like 20 pages to find a good review. But like, I found a good review on like almost every page. They were incredible. I loved the Amazon reviews here. But I limited it down to 6. I was so hard pressed to cut 4, but I included 6 and most of them are pretty short, but they're very good. I promise you they're very good. So the first review here is from Robert T. Asing Sr., who gives us 5 stars. And the head of the review says, a gem, but not worth $2,500. And the body of the review says, so what is up with this seller, TSV001 in parentheses? What makes this idiot think they can sell this item for $2,459.95? Are they retarded? I know this review is supposed to be to review the movie, but I just had to comment on this moron. Check out their other listings in the storefront. You will have a good laugh.
Great review. Thanks, Taylor. We really needed that.
I saw that one and I'm like, it was like the first review I saw and I'm like, oh my God, if this is the first one, they're all going to be amazing. And they were. It was awesome.
Well, this is a real connoisseur's film.
Yes. Yeah, this is a movie that, like, this is not an entry-level horror movie or something like that. Like, you kind of have to search to find this one, I'm going to be honest with you. Oh, God. And the next review here is from David Burns, who gives us 5 stars. And the head of the review says, maybe you had to be there. And the body of the review says, I used to rent this film for 50p a night on VHS. So this is somebody who rented this VHS before it was banned. So this movie was released for, like, 6 months and then it was banned. So this guy used to rent this film every night for, like, 6 months before it was banned.
Maybe this guy should be on, like, a list. I don't know about that.
I have really fond memories of watching when I was young. I was 10 when the video Nasty Madness came in, so I'm really pleased that nearly all the Nasties are getting a fresh lease on life. Now, I do want to have a quick digression before I continue on this review here. So there are currently, I believe, 10 video Nasties that are still technically banned in the UK because they have not had their certification be brought to the BBFC, which are the Film Classification Board. In America with the MPAA, there they have the BBFC. So there are technically 10 films from the video Nasty era that are still banned, but they could be unbanned if they are brought to the BBFC because basically no films are banned in the UK anymore.
Do we think that that's probably just because they're obscure films and nobody has bothered to claim them or go through that process yet?
Yep. So whether it's Severin or whether it's Arrow or whether it's Blue Underground, they just haven't bothered because there's probably not a market advocate for it. And one of them, I think, is a movie that we might actually cover at one point. It's called, I think, Fight for Your Life. And it's a blaxploitation, rape revenge, home invasion movie where the black characters are the victims and like the white supremacist gang are invading their home and like horribly mutilating and torturing this black family. It's very interesting. But that one's still banned in the UK. But it's uncut on YouTube. So if you want to watch it, it's on YouTube, uncut.
So like we may as well do it.
No, absolutely. If we do a Video Nasties fucking series, we might as well, because we did basically a Hays Code one, so.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at the Video Nasties list, there's so much good shit on there. So much meat on those bones, I think, for us.
No, absolutely. But yeah, just finishing up this review here. Watching Night of the Demon now makes me wonder what all the fuss was about. It's still really good fun, and the extras are excellent. Living through the 80s has made me deeply against censorship. A great bonkers movie and well worth adding to any horror collection. The 70s to 80s was, in my opinion, the golden age of horror, and I'm pleased that some love was given to Night of the Demon. And I agree with basically the rest of this. Like, I think 70s and 80s is easily my favorite era of horror films. Like, I'll still, like, once or twice a year find, like, some random slasher movie from the 80s, and I'm like, holy fuck, how have I not seen this? Like, every time, because there'll be some bonkers shit in it every time.
Well, and as long as there's bonkers shit in it, you're going to be, like, impressed, because you're like, okay, I appreciate that they went there. Because there's so many horror movies from the era that, again, not to put too fine a point on it, are so fucking boring. So anytime they do go there, you're like, god damn, man.
Yeah, you're watching a movie, and it's, like, kind of boring, and then all of a sudden, like, the fucking killer comes out, and he, like, stabs a woman in their, like, eye socket with, like, his finger, and you just hear the, it's like an Italian thing or something. Then a demon comes out and, like, rips her body in half, like, some wild shit like that. And it's like, they did that shit, what the fuck? And it makes you just go crazy.
They don't make them like that anymore.
They really fucking don't. And speaking of things that they don't make anymore, so BKS gives this 2 stars. And the header of the review says, Gouda? And the body of the review says, make sure to have lots of crackers and wine because this is seriously cheesy. Oh, and have a clothespin for your nose because it's stinky cheese. And I'm like, is a 6-year-old write this?
I mean, as low-budget horror movies from this era go, it's not that cheesy. It's not great. Like, I don't want to say that it's better than it is. It's not, like, amazing. But, I don't know, whatever. I got you.
Yeah. So the next review here is from Cecil B. Cole, who gives us 1 star. And the header of the review says, forget it. And it's like that scene in like Chinatown. It's like, it's Night of the Demon, forget it.
Forget it, Jake. It's Night of the Demon.
And the body of the review says, I only ordered this because an old friend appears in the movie. She was great, but she gets raped by Bigfoot in this if it tells you anything about the film. And I'm like, wait, you know the person who was raped by Bigfoot in this movie?
Was she great? Like, I know she's your friend and she's fine. All the performances in here are fine for the type of movie this. Was she great? Do we think that the performance was great?
You know what it kind of reminds me of? It kind of reminds me of in Born Losers after the girls get raped and they're all like crying like babies and sucking on their thumbs like, oh no! And it's like,
it is that, like that.
Weird
no,
hysterical
it absolutely
acting.
Reminded me. Oh, I was raped. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's goofy. It's goofy. I want to be clear. I don't think she does great. She does okay.
I don't think that is how most women respond to that. And if some of them do, then I understand that it's a traumatic experience. But I don't think that is typically the response, given how common that traumatic event is.
Sorry I would not say either. And I think that actually, oddly enough, leads into our next review here, which is one of the most baffling I've ever seen for this show. It's wild. So, P-Ski gives this 1 star. And the head of the review says, ugly racist, ellipses. And the body of the review says, undertones. Skip it. And it's like, is this?
The band, the undertones?
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. Because I think they meant ugly racist undertones, and then they meant to say skip it in the body of the review. But it's like, ugly racist undertones. And it's like, are the undertones ugly racist?
Yeah, what I mean, I am open to the idea that this movie is trashy and that, you know, there's questionable things in it. I think there's more than an argument to be made for that in the modern era. But is it racist? Like, are we just not seeing this because we're privileged white boys, because we're crazy white boys?
I think what I was reading, there was part of the special features where somebody, I think it was a cryptozoologist, because they actually interviewed a cryptozoologist. Like, they went pretty crazy in the fucking special features for this movie. And I think they were saying that there was maybe like the Bigfoot craze, and like, I guess there was maybe some parallels with like anti-black fears and like fears of like miscegenation. It's a stretch, but that was something that was mentioned in the special features, because I put the Amazon reviews after I watched most of the special features, and I'm like, is that what they're commenting on? But I don't know. There's nothing about this that makes sense, in all honesty.
If the person that wrote this review is themselves non-black and they watched this movie and immediately thought that Bigfoot is a stand-in for black people, then I feel like that's like a you problem.
Yeah, that's a you problem.
You know, I'm trying to say this as gently as I can, but you know what I mean?
No, exactly.
Like, I didn't think that when I saw a Bigfoot.
Nope, I didn't either. I'm just gonna be honest with you. Like,
Well,
if that's something
good
you
for
see,
us.
yes.
I guess we're very
Oh, geez.
progressive.
We are super progressive. And, speaking of people who are super progressive, Brian, that leads perfectly into our last Amazon review here. So the user, I am not one of you, gives this 1 star.
Ooh, he's not one of us, or she's not one of us.
Yeah. And the head of the review says, don't buy it. And the body of the review says, and this is once again our favorite category of Amazon review, Brian. You know exactly what the fuck I'm going to say. And by the way, this is relevant to me, though. I promise you this is relevant to me. So,
because you wrote it?
No, I did not write this, but it is very relevant to me. But the body of the review says, this review is for the Fat W DVD and no reflection on the original movie itself. Now, I actually do have the Fat W DVD because until 2022, this was pretty much the only widely available physical media for this movie you could get without shelling out a shit ton of money. I have it. It is literally, I shit you not, the single worst DVD of any quality of any movie I have. It is garbage. It is a DVD-R. It is a VHS rip. And it's got scenes from other movies interspliced, especially in the gore segments. So whoever this Fat W company is, you're trash. You did a terrible job. You did a fucking terrible job with the physical release of this. And I found out later that they're mostly known for like having physical media of like Jewish synagogue and like rabbinical sermons. So I'm like, why did they release this? It makes no sense. I don't understand.
They just had it. They just saw the opportunity. No one else was claiming it on the market.
No, and I'll send you a picture of the DVD box art for it, Brian, because it's so funny. You and I could make better DVD box art. I'm not kidding.
We'll use it in the IG post.
Yes, we will. Oh, God. The movie is a cult classic, but this DVD is not the original uncut movie. In parentheses, Bigfoot rape, gratuitous 70s gore, no extras, and very poor quality. And that's true. I think it's like significantly shorter, so I don't remember because I haven't watched it in a long time, but it is significantly shorter from what I remember. And then the rest of the review is actually very hopeful on the future. I mean it. So it says, this needs a proper treatment. In parentheses, Arrow, Blue Underground, Synapse, Vinegar Syndrome. Update. Severin Films has released a 2-disc Blu-ray, complete, uncut, and rescanned with over 5 hours of extras. Highly recommended. So they amended their review afterwards, so I gotta give them credit for that.
Yeah. I mean, in this case, and I hate when Amazon reviews or any type of review focuses on the fault of the physical media, but in this particular instance, I would say that it's warranted to give a bad review to that DVD release. Because it's not necessarily like, I couldn't figure out how to set my TV to channel 3. The DVD's broken.
Yeah, I bought it from a specific seller, and he put a turd in the box. I give this 1 star.
Would not recommend.
Put a used condom underneath the CD.
Did not play in my region 1.
Yeah. Oh, God. But yeah, so those were the Amazon reviews. And like I said, I had 10 total, but I didn't want to do 10 Amazon reviews. But I promise you, Brian, there were 10 amazing Amazon reviews, and I had to limit them. Maybe
someday, if we ever have time to do like bonus content, we'll do like streams or something where we can like go through reviews of albums and movies,
Yes, 100%. Just find all the unknown Vicky Huffnagels out there and all the crazy weirdos.
This is how you can tell that life no longer feels precious for me.
Yes. Oh, God. But speaking of life that is not precious, that is the end of our review here. Now, Brian, do we have any final thoughts before we get to our pluggables for this fucking awesome film?
If you are a fan of independent horror, if you're a fan of early slashers or proto-slashers, if you're a fan of gore, I mean, the thing is, none of that quite does it justice. I think this film is kind of essential if you like weird cinema. And you could say most of the video nasties are. Like, you should watch a few of the video nasties if you have an interest in independent film history or in censorship in the US or in the UK. I don't really think it's that good. Like I said, I don't want to overstate how good it is because I was surprised by how entertained I was. It's not like it's great, but it fucking delivers. The effects are fine. I mean, they're not very good, but for the budget, they're pretty inventive. They look pretty cool. They are gnarly. But I think what's interesting is, in the context of the video nasties thing, is that all of a sudden, Ryan, like for us, for our show and kind of the way we talk about things, I think it's all of a sudden people could watch movies at home. You didn't have to leave your house. You didn't have to watch them in public. You were totally free of judgment or shame. And the thing with the video nasties is that gives rise to the way it was presented in the UK press, right, is these video nasties are like the pornography of violence. They're shameful movies that people don't want to watch in public, and now they can watch them away from prying eyes of like theater tellers or things. And these are the most unhinged, gnarly movies. And frankly, I think that those movies, even like the most grotesque ones, are kind of works of art in that, like I said, they go for the grand guignol. Even if they're made cynically to get a buck, they are like doing something really extreme and challenging. And I think there's some artistic viability to that. But I think watching it now, and maybe, kids and millennials, obviously, especially old millennials, have grown up on gore sites, it maybe is important to remember that that wasn't always so accessible. There was a time where you might see Night of the Demon. I mean, maybe some people saw it by accident in 1980 at select theatrical run and were just absolutely traumatized. And maybe we need to bring back movies like this, because all of this anti-sex, anti-violence in movies bullshit that Zoomers are doing now, frankly, it makes me want to do a Mangione.
Yes. But no, I will basically echo all of your points as usual. Like, a lot of what you said, very important films were video nasties. I mean, the first Evil Dead was a video nasty, for God's sakes. And that is an essential film to like horror nowadays.
And I don't want to get anyone, and Taylor, I think I don't want to be giving people the impression that all video nasties are Evil Dead. That's like a transcendent film. But those films, and this is an example of that, they reach such a level of like violence and ridiculousness that it's pretty impressive, I would say.
Totally. And, once again, talk about influential movies, or at least infamous movies. Of course, this Cannibal Holocaust was one of the original video nasties. I think it was completely banned in the UK until 2001, and then it was cut. Significant cuts in 2001. I think it's
the story behind Cannibal Holocaust is so fascinating. It's more interesting than the movie itself.
Agreed. And also, Straw Dogs was a video nasty. I mean, fucking Maniac was it. Like, there are so many influential, infamous and legendary films. Oh, yeah. Driller Killer was the literal first video nasty.
Someday we'll probably do an Abel Ferrara series. Of course, Straw Dogs is echoing some things we have on the pipeline here, I think.
No, totally, yeah. So, Clockwork Orange was kind of one. Child's Play 3 wouldn't quite count as a video nasty because it happened.
Child's Play 3 had to do with the James Bulger case, which is...
Yep, that's true. Because that was actually part of the special features. And it turns out that the boys didn't even like horror movies, which is just a wild fact.
So all the video nasty thing, I am fascinated by this. I think it's one of the most irresponsible things that the British tabloids, for all the irresponsible things they've ever done, it's one of the worst. James Bulger was a baby who was killed by two preteen boys in a pretty fucking awful way. James Bulger was, I think, 2. The tabloids, for some reason, speculated that the boys were fans of Child's Play 3, and here's the fucked up thing with that. The parallels they draw to make that claim are by comparing the victim, James Bulger, to Chucky in the film. It's very weird.
Yeah, it made absolutely no fucking sense. I mean, the whole moral panic was based around this just old fucking bag of a woman who was morally crusading against these movies that she admitted she never saw. Yeah, something like that. Yeah, not the band White House.
No,
it was a lady.
Mary Whitehouse. That band was named after her.
Oh, I didn't realize that. That's interesting. I was thinking like the band, but okay, never mind. But anyway, so it was based off this lady who was like this moral crusader, kind of a like Phyllis Schlafly or any of these other like American bag type people, but she was the British version of that. And she admitted she never saw any of these movies. She claimed she never saw any of these movies. So she was just based off of the stupid shit she thought in her head.
Which is probably so much more depraved than anything in these movies, to be honest, because British.
No, exactly. I bet you that woman gladly voted for her local conservative MP, who later, of course, made the government with Margaret Thatcher, who committed so much indirect violence.
Mary Whitehouse was closely affiliated with Margaret Thatcher. She predates Thatcher's time as prime minister, but she was a close ally of Thatcher.
Of course. So it's the person who is against artistic violence, but is a big fan of social murder and social violence. That's the way we can put it.
Absolute fucking pond scum people.
Yeah, fucking losers. But you know what? Speaking of people who aren't fucking losers, we're not fucking losers because we reviewed a fantastic video nasty, and we will certainly review other video nasties in the future, I promise you, no matter what. Because there's a lot of them.
I think we have to. Yeah, we have to.
The UK was the single biggest, or were the strictest censors of any Western government at that time. Like, they banned a lot of things. Like, at one point, the video nasty era kind of extended into the 90s, and they were talking about the laws were so vague that films like fucking Schindler's List would have been banned under under the
Disgusting.
Obscenity Act, which is crazy.
There's a lot of really fascinating kind of critical analysis of moral panics and actually the development of violence and sexual portrayals and things in cinema. If anyone listening is interested, just to give a few quick recommendations, books that have made a big impression on me and, kind of how I think I see media analysis on this podcast. Joe Bob Briggs, of course, the host of Monster Vision, wrote a song called Profoundly Disturbing, a series of essays on films like Reservoir Dogs, Drunken Master, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Blood Feast, Mom and Dad, all about how shocking and I guess obscene quote unquote movies have changed, pop culture. There's a writer named Neil Fullwood who wrote a couple of excellent books, one called 100 Violent Films That Changed History and 100 Sex Scenes That Changed History. That kind of sounds like it would just be simple listicles, but he's a very academic. He's accessible, but he's very academic, gets a lot into psychology and sociology, and really looks at kind of the nuts and bolts. He has a whole chapter on video nasties, he has a whole chapter on male penis iconography in action films. Very strongly recommend the books by Joe Bob Briggs and Neil Fullwood to anyone with an interest in this subject, because they get so in the weeds more than we ever could.
Interesting.
Taylor, I highly recommend the books of Neil Fullwood. I think you would really get a kick out of them.
Oh, no, if you want to link it in the chat after we're done recording, 100%.
I will, yes.
But yeah, so that is our review of this fantastic film. So let's get into our pluggables. So as always, you can follow me at Carlos Chantor on Twitter.com. And as well, please subscribe and follow us on both our YouTube and our Spotify, where we are uploading every episode simultaneously to both platforms. And as well as always, please donate to our good friends Scott, Sean, and Robert, who are creating a fantastic campaign to get their series Lucifer and the Father. Another 9 episodes to complete the series. They have episode 1. It's on YouTube. I keep forgetting to link the actual video in the episode description, but I'll do that from now on. I promise you that. But I will do that. I always put the GoFundMe or Indiegogo, I can't remember at the moment, but either way, I always link that in there. And as always, our promise to you, the audience, is that if you send us a YouTube comment, send us an email with proof that you donate to the campaign, we will, within reason, match your donation to $20, $25, because we want our good friends to get more support, more moral and financial support for this great series of theirs. And as well as always, not as always, I should say, as of extremely recently, we will also put up any GoFundMes for an interesting individual who did some interesting things in New York in early December of 2024.
For real.
For real. We will put those links in there.
Almost nothing I could learn about my man that could make me take it back. I'm
sorry. And we will match those donations too. We will match those donations too.
Yeah,
$25, to be clear.
Delayed United Post and the Monopoly money is the most based shit I have heard in my life.
It's really funny. That was awesome. That was so cool. That's like a fucking Batman villain shit. I love it.
So good. So good.
Ah, Jesus Christ. But yes, Brian, do you have any pluggables?
So as, of course, follow us on Instagram, on the Facebook page, Millennials Are Old Podcast. More importantly, follow us on Instagram and Threads. That's just Millennials Are Old Pod. Of course, Instagram is tied to Threads. If you follow one, you'll follow the other. We're more active on Threads than anywhere else, just because it's new and people seem to be chewing my ear off on there. Actually, I just made some posts about your man Luigi that people kind of like. Well, people didn't like them on Threads, but a lot of people saw them, which was fun. So, follow us, Millennials Are Old Podcast page on Facebook, Millennials Are Old Pod on Instagram. I now have a routine up so that I set my alarm every time it's time to post a new episode. And if you follow at Millennials Are Old Pod on Instagram, you'll get to see whatever awesome song, just like to show off my great taste, that I choose to pair with the episode post. Usually it's something really bad like the Angry Samoans or Fear.
So yes, please follow us. Like I said, on everything. Of course, we will post all the GoFundMes for every single individual who helps correct the American health insurance record here. We promise we will. Our good friend Scott, Sean, Robert, we will not forget you, I promise, but we want to make sure that all of our campaigns are aired out there for fucking sure. So.
Yes.
And then speaking of people who may not be having a good night like our good friend Luigi, I'm going to try to have a good night's sleep and hopefully no demons give me nightmares. You know what I mean, Brian?
I'm hoping that I get a little visit from a little night demon,
Ooh,
you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Just like Eminem and all the cool white boys, we're going to face our demons in our sleep.
Cleaning up my closet as I fall asleep at 33 years old.
All right, so yes, have a good night, everybody. Don't let Sasquatch bite. Good luck to you, Luigi, and good luck to our friends Scott, Sean, and Robert. Have a good night, everybody. Sleep tight, and I think I'm going to release this on New Year's, so happy 2025, everybody. So
happy 2025, everyone. New Year is off to a bad start.
Yes, have a good one, everybody. Have a good night.